Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Career Planning in a Crisis, Generosity and Compassion to Advance Our Community's Professional Goals, brought to you by the American Astronomical Society and the Society's Committee on Employment. I am Diane Frendak, the Director of Membership Services at the AAS, and I'm pleased to guide you through today's hour-long programming. Let me start with some general webinar items. Everyone in this webinar is in listen-only mode. However, you are strongly encouraged to share your questions by typing them in the questions pane or box in the control panel. I will collect the questions for a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation, and I'll also make some announcements later regarding upcoming meetings and some new career services resources. Finally, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the AAS website within the next few days. Next up is my introduction of today's speaker, Alaina G. Levine. Alaina is an award-winning entrepreneur, international keynote speaker, STEM career consultant, science writer, corporate comedian, and author of Networking for Nerds, a book that has had the honor of being named one of the top 5 books, the 2015 by Physics Today magazine. Alaina writes Your Unicorn Career, a careers column for the AAAS Science Careers website, and is a regular speaker and consultant for the AAS. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the webinar over to Alaina. Alaina, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Diane, and I want to thank you and your entire team at the American Astronomical Society for hosting these webinars about career development. I want to start today by taking a moment to actually apologize. I wanted to apologize on behalf of the AAS, and I wanted to clarify, quite frankly, the poorly chosen language that we use to describe today's career-related webinar. We are truly sorry, genuinely, truly sorry, and can certainly understand that you may have been insulted or offended or upset by what we wrote to describe this webinar. But I wanted to help you understand where we were coming from so that you would see that when we talk about generosity and compassion to advance all of our career goals, to advance our community's goals, especially in the middle of multiple crises, which is what we as a human being, as a community of human beings worldwide are dealing with, and then nationally in the United States in particular, but individually and also within academia and within science, I wanted you to understand why we chose the words that we did. However poorly chosen, I wanted you to understand where we were coming from. When we say that this webinar is about generosity and compassion to advance career goals, and we changed the title to call it Our Community's Professional Goals, we are clarifying that, first of all, we know we're in the middle of, again, multiple crises. That's clear, and we're in this together, and it is not an easy situation, and it is harder for a lot of our colleagues, particularly our Black colleagues, our indigenous colleagues, and our other colleagues of people who are people of color. We're not going to lie. It's very hard. It's very upsetting. That's one aspect of it. We're in these crises, particularly when we started planning this webinar, we were thinking about the pandemic. And what we were thinking about when we were thinking about the pandemic was our concern over the fact that people were losing jobs, that people were losing grants, that people were who, particularly in astronomy and astrophysics, who were on the career track to be an academic or to be a researcher in a research institute, were advancing their careers by spending an entire academic year in the academic job search to finally get a job offer at a university and to have that offer dissipate into thin air because of the budget cuts within institutions right now as a result of the pandemic. We wanted to help you move your career forward. But here's the thing. When we adopt and really understand that we are aiming to be compassionate and generous and inclusive with all of our professional activities, which includes our personal activities too. When we recognize that that is our aim 100% of the time, we can see that by moving our colleagues' careers forward through a spirit of generosity, compassion, and inclusiveness, we're helping everyone in the community. Because job searching and career advancement is not ever about what can I get from you? What can I take from you? How can I manipulate you or trick you into giving me a job or giving me a grant? That's never what we're talking about, ever. We are always talking about a spirit of generosity, of building truly a win-win partnership where I want to see what I can do for you. I want to see how I can be a resource to help you. I want to see what we can do together to advance your goals. That is the mindset and the heart set, admittedly, of spirit of generosity, compassion, and inclusiveness. And what we do when we advance our careers is we use that. We build a foundation on that. And all of our professional activities reflect our genuine feelings of compassion, generosity, and inclusiveness. So it's not mutually exclusive to pursue a job or advance a career and be genuine and be generous and be someone who's filled with gratitude and compassion and inclusiveness. They are intertwined like a double helix. They cannot be separated. So I wanted you to understand that. And the other aspect of it is that I know in the middle of this crisis and other related crises, we're going to talk about that momentarily, that quite frankly, this is a challenging time for everybody. This is a challenging time. And I know you need a job. You need money to pay for your food, to pay for your rent, to pay for your children's food and rent. So this career webinar is related to helping you move your career forward, to getting a job, to making sure that you are paid in a job as this crisis takes away opportunities. And this includes the genuine crisis that we have had and the general crisis that we've had for decades and decades and possibly, not even possibly, but hundreds of years, particularly in the United States, which includes the crisis and the crises of systematic racism, violence, sexism, and misogyny. So we're not going to lie. We're not going to throw this under the rug. We're going to be very clear about what we mean. But we are going to say that I know you have to get a job, and that's what we're focused on today, is helping you get a job. But the way we do it is through generosity, which we're doing anyway. So there is absolute genuine feelings here. So that's what I wanted you to understand. I thank you for taking the time to listen to me as we speak today. So as usual, with this webinar, you are welcome to live tweet anything that I say. I ask that you use my handle at Alaina G. Levine and the handle for the organization, AAS_office, #networking for nerds. And of course, you are welcome and invited to connect with me on LinkedIn because that's how I communicate. LinkedIn is the main way that I communicate how different career resources, including invitations to future webinars with AAS, career resources, articles, templates, and so forth. So I want to be able to send you free career planning resources that will assist you and to enable your success in multiple ways. So you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's talk about the issue of the crisis. And what do I mean by a crisis? Because we're doing career planning in a crisis. That was the phrasing that we used. So, of course, we're in the middle of a public health crisis, and this public health crisis, this pandemic, means personal losses, which can be devastating, which are devastating to us, and it can also mean less devastatingly, but also serious uncertainty in the job market. As I mentioned, jobs are disappearing, budgets are contracting, people are losing opportunities, they're losing grants. Of course, for those of you that are early in your career that are graduate students or postdocs, you may be losing time. If you're early in your career as a faculty member, you may be losing time on the tenure clock. So there's so much uncertainty and fear associated with the job market as a direct result of the public health crisis that we're experiencing worldwide. But we're also in the middle of a very long-term crisis, which right now happens to be more visible. And that is the crisis of systematic racism, violence, sexism, and misogyny. This, of course, this crisis, this long-time crisis, leads to uncertainty in the job market. It leads to anger. It leads to loss. It leads to sadness. It leads to a lot of things. And we are seeing, I think, a very positive result in the sense that we are seeing people come forward to say, we are going to dismantle this. We are going to change this. we're going to support our Black colleagues and our Indigenous colleagues and our people of color colleagues and make a difference to provide equity, inclusion, diversity. So these are two crises, I put that in quote carefully, two crises that we happen to be interacting with at the moment that are impacting our job prospects, that are impacting our collaboration prospects. And just this week, we have a new crisis to deal with, at least in the United States, and that is changes in visa policies and potential travel bans. So these are extremely difficult challenges to manage, very difficult. Difficult to manage from a professional standpoint, but honestly, very difficult to manage from a mental health perspective and a physical health and a spiritual well-being perspective as well. These different crises have led to a lack of in-person engagement, and it can also lead to us feeling personally impacted in ways that you might not have expected. My point to you is that with every crisis that we experience as a community and within the ecosystem, everybody is experiencing that crisis in a different way. So we want to be mindful, and again, this goes back to our goal of being generous, of displaying our generous and compassion and inclusive spirit. We want to be mindful that all of the people around us are experiencing these crises in different ways and be compassionate about that and hopefully bring their perspective in so that we can change the system and change it and make it more equitable for everyone. And that includes you, and it includes me, and it includes everyone. So what I wanted to say is that challenges and crises can happen anytime in any form. They are often personalized. But what I want to do is tell you that you have the ability and the autonomy and the right to take ownership of your own crisis and how you respond to any crisis. No one has the right to tell you how you should be responding to a crisis or a challenge. It is your right as a human being to feel what you feel, to respond how you feel, and to manage it the way you feel. Our guiding principles in moving our careers forward and trying to get a job to make sure that we are paid in this crises, these crises that we are experiencing right now, is generosity, compassion, and inclusiveness and realism, because we have to be realistic about what the situation is for all, and utilizing that generosity of spirit. I want to see what I can do for you. I want to see how I can serve as a resource and look to serve you beyond the crisis that we're experiencing right now. So now, today's webinar in dealing with a crisis in your career is a dovetail. It's a second part, the second part of a two-part webinar series that we've done for AAS. The first part is already recorded and you can find it on the AAS YouTube channel. And it was about how to build a proactive crisis management plan for your career in advance. But now we're in the middle of this crisis. Now we're going to be talking about how to react and respond and keep everybody, you and me and our collaborators, our community together strong to navigate this crisis together. So what do we do in any crisis? No matter what the crisis is at any given moment, we have to stop. We have to ground ourselves and we have to breathe and recognize where we are in the universe. And I laugh a little bit in that regard because I think of my own experience with a crisis, with loss. When my dear mother passed away 3 years ago of a heart attack quite unexpectedly, it was like my heart exploded into a million shards of glass, each one sharper and more painful than the next. And it was devastating. It was a devastating, devastating loss. And it has taken me all this time to get over it, to, if you even want to use those words, I wouldn't even say to get over it, to manage the grief, to navigate through the grief, I would say. But throughout the time of my mourning and my dealing with the loss, it was very important for me, especially when I felt like I was in a crisis mode where I was getting accelerated feelings and feeling like I was falling into a pit of despair that I couldn't escape from, and feeling extremely sad and angry and frustrated and angry so much that I wanted to punch the wall. In those moments, what I had to do for my safety, for my mental safety, was to say to myself logically, Alaina, stop in this moment, just for a moment, ground yourself and breathe. Less contemplative, more reactive is what my mother would say. And I remembered that when I was in my especially significant pits of despair. In the middle of a crisis, we will feel many different types of emotions. Some will be positive, some will be negative, some you don't even have to define as negative or positive. And I just want to be clear with you. Again, we need to recognize and acknowledge these emotions. In the crises that we are navigating right now, as it relates to the job market, as it relates to moving our career forward, as it relates to our goals of contributing to the community as science-educated professionals, we may be experiencing a number of different types of emotions, including loss, sadness, and anger, shock, confusion, an unattachment or unanchoredness, or I felt unmoored when my mother passed away, that I was bobbing in an ocean and that I had nothing to connect me to anything. I felt unsafe. I felt disturbed and constantly anxious and depressed and fearful and abandoned and discarded. These were just some of the feelings that I felt in the middle of this loss, which was my personal crisis. And what was important for me was to stop and identify those emotions and recognize the role of both negative and positive emotions in the equation of moving forward, of navigating this crisis that I was experiencing. Now we take this experience of what I had, which was a personal crisis, and we think about it from a larger perspective. We're navigating an ecosystem crisis, a societal crisis, a public health crisis, a policy crisis. We're navigating very challenging crises, devastating crises right now. These crises are very difficult, and it's very difficult to navigate and identify the emotions that are involved, that we personally are experiencing as we perceive and experience the larger ecosystem crises. But guess what? You have every right to experience those emotions. I would never, ever tell you that you should stop feeling. Never. In fact, your own emotions are extremely important. They're valid, they're valuable, they're actually necessary, and they're your human right. As I mentioned, you own them. So I want you to give yourself space to feel, to honor yourself in the middle of these crises, and give yourself time to feel and the space to feel what you need to feel, that will allow you to process, reflect, heal, and hopefully move forward on your own timeline. That's what I did with my loss. I allowed myself to feel those feelings when I felt like I was in a pit, literally felt like I was in a pit of despair that I could not escape from. I allowed myself to feel those, and then I aimed to move beyond those. And I used the techniques that we're talking about today. Now, one thing that's very important, particularly as it relates to career development and job searching in the middle of a crisis experience, is that you not having a job at this moment, maybe you did apply for a job and you didn't get it, or you got a job offer and it was dissipated because of the budget cuts. You not having a job has absolutely nothing to do with who you are as a human being and your value as a human, just as a human. Not to mention your value as a science-educated professional, as somebody contributing to the inclusiveness of our astronomical communities. But your goal to navigate these emotional challenges that can impact how we react and proactively plan to respond to these crises is to act carefully, deliberately, and quite frankly, compassionately towards yourself and others deliberately every day. So we're going to engage. The first unit of consideration is ourselves in a system. If we are not safe, we cannot help others. Remember the old adage, if the plane is going down, you put the mask for the oxygen on yourself first, then you put it on your child. This plane is going down right now. We have a public health crisis that is extremely devastating. We have a societal crisis that is extremely devastating. This plane is going down, but I will not be able to help my colleagues, my friends, my brother and sister in this without putting the mask on myself first. That means that I have to engage in very meaningful and thoughtful self-care and self-compassion first and foremost. You have to have self-care and self-compassion for yourself. Then you give compassion to the community. Your mental health is the most important. We also have to exhibit and remember to engage in flexibility and adaptability because this is a constantly changing system. and we have to have appreciation for what we're able to achieve day to day. What I have found in advancing a career and looking for a job in the middle of a crisis is that if you can develop a process that will allow you to see that you are achieving small, measurable, perhaps easy tasks that you can do every day that don't require an emotional investment or burden, that you will actually be able to move forward and start doing higher level investment activities for your career and your job and your collaborations within the community that you are endeavoring to nurture. So what I did in the middle of the pandemic was I actually created a notebook. In fact, I'll even show you the notebook. I pulled this notebook out of my list of my piles of notebooks that I've gotten from conferences, and I made a list of 4 or 5 things that I was going to do every single day that did not require any sort of investment of high level of emotion or high level work, because working in a pandemic and looking for a job is very difficult. And admittedly, as some of you heard from my previous webinars, as a professional speaker, as soon as the pandemic hit, all of my in-person gigs dissipated within a matter of a couple of weeks. So I literally had my income impacted immediately from the pandemic. I had to act quickly to respond using the techniques that I'm describing today. I acted with my genuine spirit of generosity. I reached out to colleagues and I said, I want to see if I can be a resource for you. I want to see if I can help you. Maybe there's a way that I can give webinars. I've been giving webinars for many years on topics that would be of use to your team. If I can be of assistance, please let me know. I'm going to actually give you an email template that you can copy word for word if you want in a few moments that will help you understand exactly what you could say in an email to help you move your career forward in the middle of a crisis that truly demonstrates your genuine, heartfelt compassion, generosity of spirit, and inclusiveness. Anyway, with that list, I made a list that would require no emotional investment on my part, but would allow me to see that I was moving forward, because the crisis was so impactful for me personally and so emotionally devastating to hear people passing away, to know people were getting sick, people I knew were getting sick. People were losing jobs, they were losing grants, they were losing time, they were losing lives. I needed to make a list of things that I could do, small, easy, measurable tasks. So one of my tasks on that list in that notebook that I check off every day is get dressed. Did I get dressed today? Yay, I got dressed. Did I make my bed? Yay, I made my bed. Another thing I made sure to do is respond to emails, because suddenly I was inundated with so many emails and I just did not have the energy or the emotional enthusiasm to actually respond to emails. So I made it a part of my list. Over time, over days, over weeks, I started to see the check marks next to those things. And I didn't do everything every day. Sometimes I didn't get dressed. Sometimes I didn't make my bed. Sometimes I was lucky if I got off the couch. And so I was able to see that list accumulate and that I was achieving those tasks. And that bolstered my confidence to be able to take advantage, to be able to move forward and serve my community in larger ways. The next thing that I did, and I do, and I would encourage you to do in the middle of a crisis to job search and to move your career forward and to move the career forward of your colleagues and your community, is to view this as a logic problem. So we've now identified that we have emotions, because we're human beings. We've identified our emotions that we have. And I would even encourage you to write a list of the emotions, the feelings that you're experiencing, just so that you can download it from your brain. But the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at this like an equation. The end of the equation is you getting a job. You need a job. You absolutely have to have money. So we're going to get you a job. Guess who also needs a job? I need a job. Your colleagues need jobs. We all need jobs. In other words, the community needs jobs. The community needs the benefit of jobs. So we are not only helping ourselves, we're helping our community. But we're thinking first for the community. We're thinking first for the community. So we use our STEM education training, our education in STEM, to look at this as an equation. And when I say this is business, it's not personal. What I mean is we're trying to remove from this equation at this moment the emotional aspect of it, just so that we can see that there are actual steps to this equation that we can solve. This is a logic problem. We're going to collect data about ourselves and what we can do for colleagues and how we could help colleagues and the community during these crises. We're going to collect data about the community, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. We're then going to communicate that data. What is it that I can specifically do to help your research group right now? How can I assist your team right now? That's marketing. Then we're going to look to find partners to help these individuals, to find individuals and colleagues and compatriots and community members who we can build mutually beneficial alliances with. Always going forward with the idea of what can I do for you? That's the networking aspect. All the while we are understanding and trying to engage a sense of the state of the units that are incorporated into this logic problem. I'm going to tell you about that in the next slide. Then once we have these steps done, then we apply for jobs and then we get the job. That's the equation. You can solve an equation and you can solve a problem that's a logic problem. That's what we're endeavoring to do. The units of consideration, some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but it's important to mention again. What we're talking about is whenever we're in a system of any kind, we always have to think about what are the units of consideration that actually contribute to that larger ecosystem. So, of course, the fundamental unit is ourselves. It's the individual within that ecosystem, right? So we start with the individual. Then we go up to the next level, and that could be your team or your organization, which could include your university. The next level is your community. Now, your community consists of two different types of communities. It includes your field, so your field of astronomy, your field of astrophysics, your field of science, but it also includes your geographic community, your national community, your cultural communities. So all of these communities are relevant units of consideration. And then all of these contribute to the larger system or the larger unit, the largest unit of, next up would be the universe, of course, is the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is the economies, the governments, the society. So these are the units of consideration. So going back to the logic problem, we need to gather data about the situation that we're in and how the different units of consideration are impacted by the situation that is impacting perhaps the ecosystem, which is what's happening now. So we have to ask, what is literally, and I use that word carefully, what is literally happening right now? And what do we need to do right now? And what do we want to do right now to help our colleagues and to move forward to get the job that we need to survive? One of the questions we can ask ourselves, besides what do we need to do, is are there steps that we can take? If we just lost our job or if we lost time or a grant, what can we do with our previous employer or our previous agency? Are there steps that we can take to help us? For example, for those of you who have lost jobs, you may be able to get unemployment insurance. You may be able to get assistance from the previous employer to move on to another job. You may be able to get information or resources or even consulting to connect with headhunters and recruiters who can help you transition to other positions. And in related to this, there might be something that the previous employer or institution can help you in securing a visa, the appropriate regulatory documents that you need to get the position that you want in the nation that you want. So in addition to the data that we're trying to gather about the situation, we are also trying to understand what's happening in the industry. And here I mean the academic industry, I mean the astronomical industry, I mean the sector wherever we happen to work. If we're not in academia, it could be something else. And also what's happening in the larger ecosystem. So these are the kinds of questions that we're using to gather data. Data. It's all about data. Now, once we have data, we're going to use our training in STEM and create a series of processes to move our careers and to move our colleagues' careers forward. That's the goal. So the processes will help us to identify and achieve whatever goal we happen to have and whatever goal happens to be for our colleagues in our community. Our processes are also going to help us achieve financial wellness. It's going to help us with high impact networking, where we're looking to create high impact, mutually beneficial alliances where we're both providing value to each other over time. It's going to help us for job searching and also researching of different organizations that could potentially hire us and our colleagues. It's going to help keep us mentally safe and calm, and it's going to help keep your family safe and calm. always being compassionate, always being careful with yourself, safety first, safety first, safety first. So the processes that we put in place are going to help us to do all these things. So you're going to develop processes that will allow you to navigate these crises and other crises that you may experience in your lives and your careers in the future in such a way that you are endeavoring to be safety first, safety first, safety first. We gather data in many different places. It's very important if we're going to advance past a crisis or through a crisis or within a crisis, we have to gather data. Gathering data about ourselves, the first unit of consideration, the individual, is the first step. So what data do we have about ourselves? It's very relevant and critical for you to know what your value is to your community at a moment like this. Because in a crisis, when we lose jobs and when we see jobs dissipating and when we see career opportunities drying up and our goals, maybe you had a goal of working in another nation this summer to do research and you're not able to travel there. Or maybe you spent the last year applying for time on a telescope and suddenly that time is not available to you for whatever reason. When these opportunities dissipate, it's going to be very, very important for us to remember the truth about ourselves. Because what happens is our brain creeps in and says, when we're dealing with a crisis, that we have no value. Our brain tricks us into thinking that we are, while we're sad, while we're furious, while we're feeling a loss, while we're feeling anger, it tricks us into thinking that we do not have something to offer our colleagues, that we do not have something to help our community. So what we need to do is rely on hard data about who we are and go back to that data in the crisis to remind ourselves of the truth, of the factual information about your value as a human being and a professional. And that when I say a professional, I don't mean just somebody who has a job or has advanced in their career beyond university. I mean somebody who's in school too. We all have value. We all are contributing to the community of astronomy as well as our other communities too at any given time. So take a look at the skills that you've gained from the different experiences that you've had, your strengths and your weaknesses, the problems you solved and you can solve, your career goals and your job goals. And your job goals may include that you need, I'm going to talk to you more about that later, a certain amount of money. You may need a job in a certain amount of time, so you may have a timeline and a deadline. You may, in terms of your job, your data that you're gathering about yourself, very relevant list to make is a needs and wants list. What do I need out of a job? I need to be able to do X and Y and Z. But what do I want out of a job? Well, I'd like to be able to also do outreach. I'd like to also be able to teach, or I'd like to also be able to do X. But what I need to do is, Y, Z, and Z plus 1. So there might be intersection between the needs and the wants, but it's very relevant and important for you to see a list, a data list from your brain downloaded onto a piece of paper that says exactly what it is that you need and want from a job. This skill inventory matrix, you're welcome to take a photograph of it and use. I use this quite a lot. I offer this to you as a way to download data from your brain. You take a look and list out anything that gave you experience, which could be a job or a school project or an internship or a research assistantship or a TA-ship or a leadership role or anything you've done. You think about what the technical skills were. You think about what the business skills were, which include event planning, procurement, accounting, mentoring, training, risk management, sales and marketing, all these different ancillary skills that you gain from studying science and training in science you've gained. You think about the soft skills that you gain, which include oral and written communications and leadership, diplomacy, conflict resolution, and you think about the attributes that you realize about yourself from that experience. I'm very detail oriented. I'm very results driven. I work well in a big group. I work well in a small group. I work well independently. All this is very rich data about yourself. Facts. We're not doing opinions here. We're only doing facts. This webinar, as you recall, is being recorded. So you can go back and take a look at this matrix to clarify it for yourself and use it and even customize it for yourself. But this is a very relevant and useful tool, especially right now in a crisis, for you to see the real truth, the raw truth about your value. Now, in the middle of a crisis, particularly when we need a job, we need to be thinking about our financial health and our financial well-being. So the first thing that we do in terms of doing a financial self-assessment is we have to identify what money actually exists right now to pay for what we need. So the money that we have access to could be literally sitting in a bank account or in a shoebox under our bed. It could be in a retirement fund if you have one. It could be via loans and grants that you've gotten from your institution or from banks or whomever. And it also could be from family and friends. So what I want you to do is make a list of all the money that you have access to at this moment right now and what those access points are. Who is actually supplying that money? Then you need to make a second list. And that secondary list is what actually needs, not wants, but what needs to be spent right now. So most likely you are like me and you have some very specific financial needs that have to be taken care of. You have to pay for your housing. You have to pay for food. You have to pay for your utilities. Of course, right now there's not as much transportation, but many of us are still transporting, are still traveling to get to our jobs, to get to our work experiences, to even get to hospitals to interact with our loved ones. And so that's a need. That's something you need to be spending on as well, spending money on as well. And then of course there could be expenses and loans relating to school. And of course we're in families, so we have children, we have pets, we have plants we have to take care of. These are the needs. If I was going to make a want list, I'd add for my want list cupcakes. Although sometimes it feels like my cupcake budget feels like a need list. Quite frankly, let's be honest, it's a want list. So what needs to be spent? Cupcakes, not right now, but regular food, rent, absolutely. So make a list of what needs to be spent and how much those things need to be spent, how much money should be spent on those things. So then we need to think about, in terms of our financials, once we've gathered this data about what money we have access to and what money we need to spend and where, then we say what actions can we take right now. So what can be cut? Is there something that we can remove from our budget? What has to be spent and by how much? How long can we navigate without a job or without a grant or in this challenging area or challenging time? We want to take proactive measures. So we want to contact banks and see if we can negotiate payments of loans. We want to contact grant agencies and ask for extensions. We want to contact our utilities, our landlords, the people who we are supposed to pay money to see if there's any room for negotiation to get a break on that. And also we want to contact our employer or institution. And I think about a case study that I recently heard about. I'm writing an article right now about how to navigate during a financial and public health crisis in this nation in science. And I was talking to a principal investigator who was saying that one of the things that she was doing for her proteges, for her postdocs and her graduate students who were in her lab and her research group, was that she was aiming to shift funds from different places to pay proteges in different ways, in new ways. So her chief experience, and I loved this concept, I asked her, how is the crisis impacting your career? And she said, you know what? The most important thing for me is not my career, it's the careers of my proteges. It's the careers of the postdocs and graduate students in my research group and in my department that I'm responsible for. Because I feel terrible that they are losing time, that they planned experiments a year in advance and we had to trash them or walk away from them or throw samples out, or they were going to do field work and they were not able to go to the field, or they're not able to access the data or the samples or anything as they were. So they're losing this time. And the money that we were going to spend on sending them to do field work, for example, in the ecology community, or to do other types of research that involve laboratory work, we can't spend anymore because either the money has disappeared or has to be allocated in a different way. So what she was aiming to do was truly embody that spirit of generosity, which is what we're talking about today, to help others with their careers, to help others think about how they can navigate this crisis, and to think creatively and innovatively about shifting funds to pay those proteges with different types of money in different ways. So they would still get the education, they'd still get the training, they'd still be on track, and they would still get paid. That's what she was thinking of. Now here's the reality of that. And this is why I use the phrase compassion in a very genuine way. This is what I mean by compassion, generosity, and inclusiveness. By helping her proteges stay on track, get paid, do the research, perhaps in new ways, but still do research. Ultimately, she's helping herself. She is creating a win-win alliance. She is creating a win-win partnership. She is giving value to her proteges, but she's getting back. But she's not thinking about that right now. And that's the essence of what I'm talking about today, is we don't need to think about what we need right now. Even though I know we need a job, we don't need to think about as the forefront idea. What we need to think about is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? It ultimately will help us, but that's not our concern. Our concern is, what can we do for you? That's a true spirit of generosity, compassion, and inclusiveness. Now, once we've gathered this data, once we've gathered the financial data and the data about our value and our expertise, now we need to prepare and edit and refine our marketing materials. And what I mean by marketing materials are your resume, your CV, your cover letter templates, all these different documents that are used to communicate and articulate the value that you can provide collaborators, the value that you can provide potential employers, or even proteges. It goes in all different directions. So this is the time to actually take a look at the skill inventory matrix to see what skills you realize that you have, and include them in your CV, include them in your resume if you're thinking about careers outside of academia. Write out your cover letter templates, and edit and refine your LinkedIn profile. And any other online presence, update your online CV or your portfolio. This is also the time to start building and crafting and fine-tuning your research statements, teaching statements, and diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, as well as your elevator pitches. Get these together now. Use the time in this crisis to get these together now. Have several versions of them ready, carefully copy edited, of course, using the language of the community and ecosystem that we want to engage, demonstrating, especially with that cover letter, that we want to be a resource. Now, I promised you I was going to give you a cover letter recipe or a cover letter template, but I'm actually going to give you the actual the actual cover letter. So I encourage you to take a photograph of this slide. As I mentioned to you, as soon as the pandemic hit, I lost a significant amount of my income for the year. I am reliant on individual clients to pay me to speak. They disappeared. So I had to act quickly if I was going to pay for my rent, if I was going to pay for my food. And what I did was I emailed my clients, current clients, former clients, even colleagues that I had been talking with over the years, but had never engaged in a formal collaboration with. And I emailed a version of this email, and I'm going to read it to you. I hope this email finds you and your family healthy and safe during this challenging time. I wrote that immediately. I am reaching out to you because there may be an opportunity to collaborate, and I wanted to see if we can explore this together. I was recently informed, due to the current crisis, that my position at the university, my position in Organization X, has been eliminated. As I consider my next career opportunities, I am excited about the possibility of contributing to your efforts at your institution, your research group, your organization, which, as you know, has always been of great interest to me. Indeed, I see alignments between my own career goals and experience, knowledge and skills, and your mission and values. Would it be possible to have a 15-minute informal Zoom appointment with you in the next few weeks? I would like to learn more about what you're working on and see how I might be able to assist you now and in the future. Perhaps I can be a resource to you and your team during this difficult time. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you. That is what I wrote. And I got responses from people that said, thank you so much. I really appreciate you checking in on us. I really appreciate your offer. And we were able to create collaborations. We were able to create opportunities for each other. And so when I talk about creating and accessing hidden career opportunities through networking, and remember, networking is building mutually beneficial alliances where we're both providing value to each other. When I talk about accessing hidden career opportunities, what I mean is creating opportunities for the two of us to create value together. Those opportunities are not necessarily clear. They're not necessarily advertised, but they become elucidated once we have these informal conversations, which can only be had if you reach out to me in the spirit of generosity, compassion, and inclusiveness, and say you want to be a resource to me during this challenging time. Could we have an informal conversation to discuss it? So this was the email, or version of this email was what I used. This is what I've now suggested to my own colleagues, friends, proteges, even clients. And this is the type of email that I highly encourage you to think about as you engage in high impact networking. Now we're going to collect and organize our contacts in a very specific way. We're going to create a process for that. We need to build collaborations very quickly. We need to build our community and nurture our communities in a very specific way. So we're going to build a process to do that too. So one of those processes, one of those aspects of the process is that we do not send out mass emails. I did not send that email to 55 people in one email. I customized it for every single person to make sure that every single person knew I was thinking about them specifically. To find people, I used LinkedIn quite a bit, actually, to be honest with you. I used my own email, to be honest with you too. But as a member of the AAS, you also have access to the membership directory. So I would also take a look at the membership directory to find other AAS members that you can connect with. And you can find people by looking at former or upcoming, even whether they're virtual or not, conference agendas, your alumni connections and association, including on LinkedIn, and even your emails. I went through my emails to see who I had contacted. And this is the same for both current contacts that you have and you want to reach out to them now, or new contacts that you want to start the relationship with. I made a plan and I thought to myself, how many emails can I send out each day, each week, each month? And then I made a process to keep track of my contacts, my emails, and any follow-ups I made. That's the part of the high impact networking process. Very, very important and very, very useful. The other thing that I did during all of this was that I did an ecosystem health check. Now, what I mean by that is the larger ecosystem, the society, the economy, it's very important and relevant to understand what's happening there. So to understand what's happening in an economy and how it's changing day to day as it's impacted both by the pandemic and the related crises that the pandemic is causing, not to mention the decades and hundreds of years of crises that have been caused by a system of systematic racism, violence, misogyny, and sexism. It's very useful to touch base with the economic community within the economic organizations within the communities that we want to work in, or we want to collaborate in, or we want to contribute to. So for example, industry clusters are a fantastic way to take an ecosystem health check. Now, what's an industry cluster? You might also have heard the word hub. And here's an example, right? Silicon Valley in Northern California, biotech in San Diego and Boston, astronomy and optics in Tucson, Arizona, where I live. So in Tucson, there's a huge optics community. And so what a cluster, an industry cluster is it is a critical mass of companies of organizations of a like-minded industry in a particular geographic region. So it's very much tied to the geography. So in Tucson, just to give you an example, Tucson, we have a very strong optics cluster. We have a lot of optics and photonics companies that of course relate very closely to our heavy and high impact astronomy community here. A lot of astronomical instruments, a lot of astronomical software is produced here in Tucson. There are a lot of professionals who have expertise in optics and photonics and astronomy here in Tucson. And because there's this critical mass of organizations and spin-offs and research groups in optics and photonics and astronomy, the community representatives came together to form an association, and it was originally called the Arizona Optics Industry Association. That industry cluster organization has information about how the economy, particularly as it relates to technology and specifically how it relates to optics and astronomy, is occurring and moving and changing day to day in Tucson and quite frankly worldwide in the larger optics and photonics and astronomy communities. So those representatives of the association of the optics industry here in Tucson know about hidden opportunities. They know about what companies are growing, what companies are laying people off, what companies and organizations are about to spin off, what companies and organizations are about to get huge government grants and contracts. So that can be a fantastic way to connect with those clusters, get on their mailing list, and ask the board of director member, can I have an informal conversation? I'd like to learn more about the economy here as it relates to optics, as it relates to astronomy. That's a wonderful way to get an ecosystem health check. Similarly, chambers of commerce also provide that information, as do what are called economic indicator publications, which you can easily find online just by Googling that for the region that you're in. Business publications as well. So I would reach out to these and get on their mailing lists. So then we also want to look at where the opportunities, the actual job opportunities are. So of course, the advertised positions that we need to get for ourselves and our community right now are advertised in a couple of different places. Of course, the AAS job register, but there's also jobs that are advertised on LinkedIn. In fact, some jobs are only advertised on LinkedIn. There are also jobs that are only advertised on job websites like Glassdoor, Indeed, Science, Careers, and Nature jobs, and of course within the organizations themselves on the organizational websites. But then again, the industry clusters and associations and chambers, they often have jobs that are advertised as well. The hidden career opportunities, the hidden jobs, are the ones that we access from networking by demonstrating to the other party that we want to be a resource. And it's clarifying that right now, this is the value that I can help you with. This is what I can do to inject value into your organization. Those hidden opportunities will come from your networking, from your contacts, and from those clusters. I encourage you also, as part of your process to navigate this crisis, to leverage a professional society. And I know some of us today are very early in your career. I'm very happy to see that we have a few people who are in high school joining us. And I'm so glad that you are. I'm so glad that you're thinking about a career in astronomy and astrophysics and cosmology. That's awesome. We need you. We need more brilliant brains. So you can actually take advantage and leverage being a part of the AAS society and community. And the AAS is offering so many different resources to help you wherever you are in your career, whether you are a high school student, a college student, graduate student, postdoc, and beyond, or are doing something else completely. We are developing career webinars, as you know, templates, tip sheets, blogs. You have that membership directory. There are committee memberships that you can be a part of and learn from. The job register, as I mentioned, and of course, by looking at conference agendas, so you can see what is the state of the society, what is the state of the community. Ultimately, our goal is to take this time during these crises to think entrepreneurially and innovatively, not only about where and the kind of work, where we'll work and the kind of work that we'll do, which means the value that we would provide our community, but also what problems can I uniquely solve? What problems am I uniquely positioned to solve because of my expertise, because of the knowledge, because of the classes that I've had, because of the skills that I've developed? So what you can do during this crisis, as we sum up for today, and then I'm going to take your questions, is utilize this time during these crises, if you can, to learn and hone new skills, to network with new and diverse communities and explore new collaborations and collaborators, to provide new value and solve new problems for new collaborators in the community, to build up and nurture your community, to apply for opportunities like fellowships, grants, and other opportunities, and also to do self-care, to quiet our mind, to do a self-assessment about what we need and want, to stop, to breathe, to reset, and to focus. And always to remember to have compassion, patience, and gratitude for ourselves as the first unit of consideration, and for our colleagues, particularly those who have not had a voice in the past. We want to support everyone in the community. That is how we will navigate these crises. That is how we will all move forward and weather these crises, together as a community. Finally, as we maintain compassion for ourselves and others, it won't be easy to weather these crises. It's never easy to weather any kind of crisis. It wasn't easy to weather the crisis that honestly I still have to deal with, which is the death of my dear mother, my dear mommy, 3 years later. It is still something I am navigating and taking it day by day, breathing, resetting, focusing. And it will seem whenever you're dealing with a crisis, and particularly when you're dealing with multiple crises like we're dealing with right now, that there will be more downs than ups for long stretches of time. But honestly, having the processes that I've described in place will keep you objectively focused on the logic problem, which is the key point. And yet, even though we're trying to solve an equation, even though we're trying to do this objectively, we will stumble. So we will adjust our processes, we will be kind to ourselves, and we will recognize that for every move we make, we are gathering data about ourselves and our community and developing stronger communication skills that ultimately will help to nurture stronger, inclusive communities for all of us. And that, my friends, is the goal. So I thank you so much. Again, you are welcome to tweet anything that I said or any of the slides here. Handle for the organization, AAS_office, handle for me, Alaina G. Levine. Please join me on LinkedIn if you haven't, so I can send you free career planning resources. And with that, I'd like to hand this back to Diane. She has some amazing announcements for you, and I'm going to take your questions. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Alaina. Okay, so I have a few announcements to make. Two of our division's meetings have moved virtual. Both are in August, so if you are interested in how things move in space, you might want to attend the DDA meeting. Today, there is a deadline for grant applications, and this would cover the registration fee for this meeting, so please consider it. There's an upcoming abstract deadline, and the Duncombe Student Research Prize, if you win this year, it will give you travel grant money to travel to the meeting in 2021. God willing, it will be in an actual city somewhere as opposed to online. So the Solar Physics Division has pretty reasonable rates for their registration. This one is online as well. And that cool image there is a pin that they will give to their members who attend the meeting.
Very nice.
I guess the next slide is an upcoming kind of save the date for the winter meeting in Phoenix. And you can see that abstracts and registration will open in the next 2 months. And then the final slide has to do with some of the career development resources that we have online. You can see on the top nav, 2 blocks over from our logo, there's a careers section. And this is where we'll have a lot of Alaina's tip sheets and recorded webinars and the schedule for what's upcoming. So please visit this site. All right, thank you for attending this webinar. I do have a few questions though, if you're ready, Alaina.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, the first one is from Tricia. And she asks, how does the HighImpact networking email template translate to academia? I'm not sure I know how to apply this to promoting myself for a university or research position.
Thank you, Tricia, for that excellent question, a very relevant one, an important one. So if you take a look at that email, and actually let me just go back to that, honestly, so you can take a look at that while we're speaking. This email is actually, you could basically quote this email word for word. It's absolutely related to academia. So you could just, I was saying, like I've said, I was recently informed that due to the crisis, my position in my university or my postdoc position has been eliminated. You don't even have to use that phrase. If you don't want to, you can say, I'm considering, as I explore new career opportunities, as I consider new collaboration possibilities, I'm excited about the possibility of contributing to your research group in active galactic nuclei at the University of Arizona, because this is the type of area that I am endeavoring to be in. In fact, I've worked in this field for a number of years. I've published papers in this, or I'm experienced in this, or this is what I am very passionate about. So you can just change phrasing just slightly to include verbiage that is directly related to academia. But this email, quite frankly, when I was writing it, I was thinking honestly about academia first, and then I was thinking about industry and opportunities beyond academia second. So ultimately, this email is useful for academia with just some slight modifications. Thank you, Tricia.
Okay. Our next question is somewhat aligned to this, and it's from Chris. And he asks, or she asks, or they ask, do you have any suggestions for transitioning from academia into industry careers not directly related to STEM?
Yeah, so Chris, thank you for that amazing question also. And I am going to apologize first off by giving you the answer. The answer is, it's a long answer. There are ways to do this, but here's the better answer. We're actually going to do this in another webinar. So if you stay tuned, we will actually address this very specific issue of how to transition beyond academia, specifically into industry and other sectors with an astronomical background. The bottom line, just to give you a quick answer to that question, which does require a longer answer, which is why we're doing the webinar. The bottom line is that we have to be able to understand what are the problems in that ecosystem that we could potentially solve for those colleagues, for those organizations, and to use their language to describe our problem solving and the value and the skills that we have. So we have to actually translate our expertise into their language for us to for them to understand what it is that we could do for them. It is absolutely not only possible, but probable for you with an astronomical background to move into a career outside of academia, outside of research. It is something that is absolutely accessible to you, and if you're interested in it, we can explore it, but I wanted to just give you that that quick hint that it is something we will be exploring in depth in a future webinar.
Okay. The next one is from Steve, and it's kind of a nuts and bolts question. Are today's webinar slides available to download? And I know that this is recorded, and we'll have it up at the AAS website, but do you also include slides at any time?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Diane, and thank you, Steve. So that, the question to that is, I do not provide the handouts, but the video, as you know, will be available. And I think, Diane, we have time for like one more question, right?
Okay, I think so. Let's see. This one is from Caroline. What do you recommend for people very early in their careers who are having trouble finding positions they are qualified for?
Hi, Caroline. Thank you for that. Appreciate that question too. Very important. The way that we can think about it, honestly, is the networking that I talk about, where we ask for informal conversations, usually no more than 15 minutes. We ask to learn more about what they're working on. We ask in the email, using the email template that I provided, in fact, or a version of that. What we're aiming to do is we need to use networking. We need to leverage networking to gain information about the ecosystem and the organizations that operate in the ecosystem to find out what are the jobs, where are the opportunities, where are the experiences, and what do I need to do now to position myself for success in those organizations. So it's the networking that is actually going to give you access to this information, which is absolutely vital in building your career, especially early in your career. So it's never too early or too late to network. So even, I know, again, we had a high school or online, even if you were in high school, even if you're in college, no matter where you are in your career, it's never too early to reach out to people and say, I read your paper in the Astrophysical Journal. It was really interesting to me. Or I saw that you're speaking about STEM outreach in communities that are underrepresented minority groups in STEM. I am very interested in this subject. This is the kind of thing I want to learn more about. I am early in my career and in my career explorations. Could we set up a 15-minute informal conversation so I could learn more about what you're working on? Maybe there's something I can help you with. Remember that generosity of spirit. And I want to see how I can position myself for success in the future to assist you in the future. So that's how you do it. That's the nutshell. And if you take a look at the networking webinar that I did a few weeks ago, which is on the AAS website now, you just saw a link to it, you'll get some more tips about how to do that in a very very good ROI, or return on investment, in terms of building those high impact win-win alliances with others where you're giving and looking to see how we can build something together. So thank you for that.
All right. Should we wrap up? Thank you, Alaina, so much for taking the time and presenting this webinar. I know our next one will be on Wednesday, July 8th, and I think it has to do with career planning for astronomers, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, and I'm really excited about that and other webinars that we're going to be doing. Since this was recorded, if you have any future ideas for webinars that you'd like to see, please email me, alaina@alainalevine.com. Please give us your feedback. What can we do to help serve you in this community? And again, thank you so much for your kind attention and for the opportunity to work with you during these crises and to help you and to help each other weather this together. Thank you so much.